Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam's first canto, chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, text number 11. Vadantita tattvavidas tattvam yad jnanamadvayam brahmayeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. Translation. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan, purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is a partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is a glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun God. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and freed from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is a living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is a sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yat jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. Omagana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanshi Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahoditao Gaudadai Pushpavanto Chidro Shando Tamundao. So this is a very often quoted verse from the Bhagavatam explaining the different features of the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth is Purnam. He's full in his nature, as the invocation in the Ishopanishad stating that amazing nature, a part of that nature of the Lord. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnad Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Evavasishyate. So the Supreme is complete. In this world we don't see that nature. Something is complete. Everything is lacking in one way or another. But the Supreme is complete in every sense. And He is Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. Everything emanates from the Supreme. Janmadya Yasya Yataha. The Supreme Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. The source of all sources. Sarva Karana Karanam. So all causes have its origin in the Supreme. And even though He's the Supreme, and so many, what do you call them?
Units?
Sorry?
Units?
Units emanate from Him. They are also complete in themselves. So like the Supreme, all the material universes are coming from Him. Mahavishnu is lying on the coals of the ocean. That enormous form of Lord Vishnu. He's so huge that universes come out from the pores of His skin. Now we can't imagine that at all. A universe. We can't comprehend the universe, how big it is. We can't even comprehend this Earth planet, this tiny little planet. What to speak of the universe. So countless universes emanate from the pores, the skin of Mahavishnu while He's laying in His Yoga Nidra, His mystical slumber. He's enjoying His sleep, divine sleep. So how can we comprehend that? We cannot comprehend that at least. In the least way. So even though countless universes come from Him and they are all complete, they have everything they need to fulfill their particular purpose. So even though so many countless universes emanate from Him, He still remains in the complete balance. Like in this world, if we give our energy, we give something out, then we lose something. We work hard, do some whatever construction, pull out a lot of weeds out here that are relevant in the moment, and then we lack energy after that. We spend our energy, and then we miss that energy. Then we need to recuperate, we need to sleep, we need to take rest, because we are lacking, we've been giving something. Or someone comes and we give them some Lakshmi, we give them some money, and we're lacking that money. Then our bank account has that amount less. So when we expend our energy, then we lose part of that energy. But that's not the case with the Absolute Truth. Even though He gives unlimited energy out, He still remains complete balance. So that's the spiritual nature, very opposite the material nature. So that's part. He's Purnam, He's complete in every sense. So the Supreme Absolute Truth is known in three features as stated here. And as Srila Prabhupada states in the purport, those who are less knowledge, they try to push their particular understanding of that Absolute Truth. Because the transcendentalists, those who aspire for transcendence, to rise above the three modes of material nature and the bondage of material energy, they strive for attaining that, transcending that, rising above it. But and they have a hard time understanding that the Supreme can be both personal and impersonal and localized all at once. Because we are limited living entities. We're so limited that, like I'm sitting here, I cannot even reach the Mridanga, which is just over there. Very limited, cannot see what's going on in the kitchen. Of course nobody's there now, but if somebody would be there or do whatever they do, I cannot see that. I might hear something, now they are cooking, because I can hear some rattling with the pots or whatever. But we cannot see or hear what's going on just a few meters beyond the other wall. So we're extremely limited. But the Supreme is not limited. So he can be both personal and impersonal at the same time, and he can be all-pervading, because the localized aspect of Krishna, Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, he is situated in the heart of all living entities. Riddhishir Junatishtati. He is there in the heart as Paramatma, the forearm form of the Lord, every single entity. Not only the huge, like living human beings, animals, big mammals, but even the insect and even the little bacteria, so small. Krishna is there as Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, Paramatma. Atma means the self, Paramatma, the higher self. So Krishna is there. And there's living entities everywhere. Sarvakata. Just go out here with a shovel and dig a little bit of earth up, and you see down there so many living entities are crawling around. We can't see all of them. That's just what we can see. You go into like these big ant hills. I was taking a japa walk in that forest, Oldskov, the other day. Very, very peaceful. Everything was so nice, and you have these huge ant hills. They're really big. They become like this. And there are just ants everywhere. It's like incredible. They're just running around. Of course, it looks like chaos. Of course, they have their whatever system, whatever they're doing, building it up, bringing food, removing eggs from here and there, whatever. They have the system, but it's just all life. Everywhere that you have ants crawling. So many. And this is just what we can see. Now, we can't see the bacteria. They are even smaller. So there's life everywhere. Even in the sun planet, from our point of view, how can you have life in there? Because it gets burned. Yet that's life as we know it. These bodies will get burned if they're in the sun, but they are living entities in the sun planet, and they have fiery bodies. Their bodies are like the sun. They're filled with that energy. The body is made of that. And to a certain extent, we can understand in this world, like fish are living in water. We can't live in water, but the fish can live in the water. The sharks and all the aquatics, and their bodies are much more made of water. They are suitable for that environment. And they even found that down in the depths of the ocean, down in these, the English word for it, these graves, Mayana Gaon, and they have these very, very deep, they're like 8 kilometers down, the deepest points. They found with their deep vessels going down there to the bottom, because it's too deep for humans to go there, the pressure is too high, but they have these kind of submarines going down there and investigating the bed in the bottom of the ocean, and they found life down there under that extreme pressure. And also you can go into the cave somewhere, it's completely dark, there's no sunlight coming in. And thus we think no life should be there, no plants, whatever, but there are life forms there too that are suitable for that particular atmosphere. So Sarvakata, the living entities everywhere. And in that every single living entity, Krishna is present as Paramatma. So he's all pervading. Not only in the living entities, but also in the atoms. Atoms everywhere. How many atoms are there just in this room? It's uncountable. We cannot count how many atoms are there just in this tiny little watch here, how many atoms are there. We can't imagine. So Paramatma is there in every single atom. So Krishna is Sarvakata in his Paramatma feature. So, and because he's there in every single atom, he's aware of everything, both directly and indirectly, as also stated in this first shloka of the Bhagavatam. He's aware of everything, directly and indirectly. So directly, the Supreme Lord, he knows, but in the spiritual world, Krishna and Narayan, he's simply engaged in enjoying. So he is not bothered with everything that goes on here, but he's indirectly, via Paramatma, aware of everything. Because Paramatma there's nothing that can be hidden from Paramatma. Whatever's going on in the mind and in the heart of any living entity, Paramatma is right there between the jiva, right next to the jiva, observing him. All his thoughts and desires are known by Paramatma. And he is there in any atom. So whatever is going on according to the physical laws, Paramatma is fully aware of it. So that's part of the amazing nature of the Supreme. So in this world, the Brahman aspect, the impersonal aspect, which as Prabhupada explains in the purport, is the effulgence of the Lord. So every living entity will have some kind of effulgence. We speak about aura. Living entities, some have a very strong aura. So there's a little some shining coming from the spiritual spark to different degrees. So in some living entities that spark is very, very covered. It's hard to see it, but in others it's very bright. Like very advanced devotees coming, you can observe there's something going there. Many devotees say the first time they come to the temple, they're desirous of starting the process of devotional service, and they meet the devotees, and they are just like kind of, wow, there's something special about that person. There's something kind of emanating from that person, so they can sense it. As we every day we go on spiritual life, we're not so much aware of it, but the contrast is very big when you come from a world where you have no saintly people. You don't see saintly people who are engaged in spiritual life, and then first time you meet them, then you can see very strongly the contrast. So the living entity has some effulgence, and Brahman is the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, and Brahman is all pervading. It's an incredible, strong spiritual light, and many in this world, they desire to attain that light, to become one with that light. And that's because of their insufficient knowledge. They think that's the highest. Now, as explained also in the purport, the supreme truth, the absolute truth, is non-dual. There's not two, it's one. It's one, but it's manifesting in different features. So it's not too different. Like in this world, we're too different. We're three different human beings in this room. We're different. We are not the same. But the absolute truth is non-dual. It is the same, it's just manifesting in different ways. So as stated again here, a Brahman is the effulgence of the Lord. It is the Lord, but it's him in another feature. It's his spiritual effulgence coming from him. So it's one in quality, but it's different still. Like the Supreme Lord is not in the Brahman effulgence performing his personal activities, but he is there in the form of his energy. So some desire to attain that aspect of the Lord, because they have a hard time understanding that the Supreme Lord can be a person. For them it's more logical or whatever, in their understanding that the Lord is opposite what's in this world. Because in this world we see personality everywhere. So people have that understanding, well, the spiritual energy has to be very different from the material, which is true. And thus they conclude, wrongly, that the Supreme has to be impersonal. And that's partially true, of course, because he is impersonal also, but he is not only impersonal. So we can say it's correct. It's like, also Prabhupada states here, there's different angles of viewing a particular object. Like if someone who might be blind, who have no experience of an elephant, and they come and they touch an elephant, they take someone who's touching their leg and say, this thing is very, very, it's very big, it has this and that feature. Another one touches what do you call it, snout, or whatever, trunk, trunk. Oh, it's long and it's emanating, air out at the end or whatever, or someone's touching the ear. No, it's very flat, it's flappy and whatever. So they give different explanations of what that object is, the elephant. But it's the same elephant, but because they're limited in their perception, they describe it differently. So the Supreme is impersonal, but it's not only impersonal. It's also all-pervading and localized. The yogis desire to obtain Paramatma. They're meditating upon that aspect of the Lord in their heart. They're sitting deeply within some caves in the Himalayas or deep forests and meditating. That's a real yogic, mystic yogic process, Ashtanga Yoga. 8-fold, Ashta, 8, means 8. So they are engaged in the 8-fold mystic yoga, and that starts with yam, niyam, things you do, things you don't do, asana. Then you start the different postures, like today everyone, when they think of yoga, they think of hatha yoga or the asanas. That's yoga to them, but that's only one part of 8 parts in the real yoga system made by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. So you have to refrain, you have to control the senses, things you do and things you don't. So you don't associate with a lot of people, you don't sit in the bustling city and engage in meditation and in the yoga process, because you get disturbed. You have to be undisturbed, and that's why you recluse yourself. And then you have to, then it goes on, pranayama, you have to control by the breathing exercises, you have to control the mind, because the mind can be controlled by pranayama. And you have to gain mastery of the body. You have to be able to sit, dhyan, and meditate for a long, long time. And to do that, you have to master the bodily movements. So by doing yoga exercises, asanas, and breathing exercises, pranayama, you can steady the mind. And by steadying the mind, then you start dhyan, meditating on that aspect of the Lord in the heart. That wonderful aspect of Krishna as four-armed Vishnu. And then they get absorbed in that, and ultimately it obtains samadhi. They become completely absorbed in that aspect, just meditating and seeing his wonderful, beautiful form. And when they obtain perfection in that meditation, and when they leave the body, the soul leaves the body through the Brahmarandra, they raise the life air. While the life air, the soul is erased and breaks out through the skull. There's a picture in the Bhagavad Gita about that also, the perfect yogi. And then he leaves, he goes to whatever planet he desires. And the perfect yogi, he desires to go to a planet of that object he has been meditating on, Vishnu. So he goes to Narayan in the spiritual world, obtains a relationship in Shantaras, because he's not actually engaged, he's just absorbed in, and then he can become a tree in one of the Vaikuntha lokas or another object, and be fully satisfied in that process. Of course, the danger is performing the real yogic process, that while advancing in that path, he obtains all the different cities, they manifest the mystical opulences, and sometimes he get distracted by that, because there's a wonderful, he can become lighter than the lightest, he can transgress the physical laws by doing that. So that's another aspect of the Supreme. It's still the Supreme, but in another feature. It's not different from the Absolute Truth. And then finally, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's the highest aspect. So they are all one and the same in their all the Absolute Truth. And they're all connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but there's still gradations. So even though that living entity who obtains Brahman, he gets free from all suffering, that's moksha. So many strive for moksha, also called mukti. Means out of the material world, samsara chakra. They end the repetition of birth and death and becomes one with the Brahman. That little particle, infinitesimal particle of spirit soul, becomes one of those infinite particles of spirit souls, because the Brahma Jyoti is filled with living entities. It's like sun particles. The sunshine coming down, he is filled with sun particles. Sometimes we can see it like on a special day, like all that particles are filtered through the window or a particular screen like that. You can kind of sense as filled with particles. And the same with the Brahma Jyoti, it's filled with spirit, souls, all particles, innumerable. It's mind-blowing how many living entities there are. We cannot comprehend in any way how many living entities. They are innumerable. So the Brahmajyoti is made from that. But then, of course, we are bhaktas, and we aspire for the Bhagavan feature of the Lord, because that's the highest. There's even more pleasure, even more perfection to obtain on the being engaged with Bhagavan. Because we know living entities, we are filled with desires. The living entity cannot stop from desiring and acting. It's not possible. That's the nature of the living entity. It is active by nature. So, the highest activity of the living entity is Krishnera Nityadas. He is an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord in one of the forms of the Lord. And again, the Lord being unlimited, he has so many different forms. So according to your particular mellow, your particular taste of the living entity, he can engage in a particular relationship with the Lord. Again, he's Purnam, he's perfect. He's got all different mellows, all different moods is there in the Lord. Like we have one particular nature. Like when we get to know each other, we know that person, he or she is like that and that. But Krishnas have unlimited different personalities. So we can only enjoy through our one particular little limited. But Krishna can enjoy unlimitedly, and thus he takes so many different forms. So we just know that Krishna and Balaram is Krishna. He's the first expansion of Krishna. But he's got a different nature, different mood. Like that. And Narayan's got another again. And all the different avatars got different moods. So whatever particular mood, particular nature of the Lord you find most attractive, that form you can engage in relationship with. So even the Lord is Purnam. He's so incredible that innumerable universes are manifesting. And that's not, of course, the highest form of the Lord. That's Mahavishnu. That's an expansion of an expansion. Because Swayam Bhagavan, the original form of the Supreme Absolute Truth, is Krishna in Vrindavan. And he never leaves Vrindavan. He never leaves the association of Radharani. Even when he goes to Mathura, he looks the same form. But that's not Swayam Bhagavan. That's one of the, whatever, Avesh or whatever, all these technical terms of when he expands is another term to him. He's still Krishna, but he has a different mood. So it's very difficult to comprehend. But that's because the Supreme is also Achintya. He's inconceivable. We can understand him, we can conceive him to a certain extent. But we cannot never consider him, comprehend him fully. Because we are so tiny. It's like a little frog in a well. How can he comprehend even the ocean? That story is often given, like one frog came back to his birthplace, the well, and he met his old grandpa, who'd never been out of the well. And that little frog had seen the ocean, so he tried to explain to the other frog what the ocean was. But the old frog, who had never been out of his well, how could he comprehend the ocean? Because his whole experience was the well, the little tiny body of water contained in the well. So he was like, what? And when the other frog said that the ocean is like huge, is kind of, what is that, 2 times, 3 times the size of this well, 10 times or whatever, because he could never understand the ocean. That's impossible. In the same way, because we are so conditioned by nature, we can never comprehend the Supreme Lord in the slightest. But by his mercy, we can understand him to a certain extent. We can become full in knowledge. And full doesn't mean everything. It means like a glass here. When this glass water is up to here, it's full. It's not like it's full. But it doesn't mean all the water is in that glass. We can just go out there, so much more water when you turn on the tap, right? So it doesn't contain all the water, but it's still full. So the living entity, to his capacity, he can become full of knowledge and full with realization. But there's still so much more to be had, but he just can't comprehend it. So, but when you're full in knowledge, something happened out there, full in realization, then you're fully satisfied. So anyway, 3 features of the Absolute Truth are there, and they're all the same. And we have to understand these 3 different features and be able to explain it to others. How the Absolute is one, but manifest in different features. How the Absolute Truth is both personal and impersonal at the same time, and even localized. So thank you very much for your attention. I think maybe one question, not too long. Chaitanya Prabhu.
One can in one sense easily understand that the Mayavadis, where they're getting the ideas from. Here there's no difference between the knower and the known, or the seer or the seen. So that can easily be understood. There's no difference between Krishna and all other living entities or everything else in existence. That everything is one. So how is it, is Bhagavatam a little unprecise, or what is happening? Why is it not more, you say this, why is it not more clearly explained? What is the difference between the seen and the seen?
That is explained in different places, but of course this is just one little shloka, and there's 18,000 verses in the Bhagavatam, and the Bhagavatam is just one book amongst so many other books in the Vedic literatures. There's unlimited knowledge, so it's all explained very minutely in different sections. Of course, we understand that, how is that, Parivad? Where it's a transformation of energy. Right? The Supreme Lord transforms via His energies into this material world. So it's all one in the sense, it's all the Supreme Lord and His energies, but He transforms, His energies transforms into this material world. So it is the same, but it's a change of the energy. But the Mayavadis, they cannot really understand that. They think that the spiritual world has to be a negation of the material world. It has to be the opposite. But the opposite of form is not no form. It's spiritual form. That's what they can't comprehend. And then of course we have to understand there's a difference between two kinds of impersonalists. There's the Mayavadis and there's the Brahmavadis. And the Brahmavadis are following the scriptures to obtain impersonal realization, but they are not envious of the Lord. They simply don't have the higher realization. But the Mayavadis are envious. They want to become the Supreme Lord and they blaspheme Him also. And thus they get the reactions like they state He has no hands, He cannot do anything. And when they read about Krishna in the scriptures, hear about it, and they say that's a Mayic form. So in this way they commit aparats toward the Supreme Lord, and thus they cannot really obtain Him actually. So that distinction has to be made between those two classes of impersonalists.
Can it also be a little similar to what Krishna is saying, if they want to worship the demigods, I give them the intelligence, also in Bhagavatam, like it's given, if you want to go in that direction, you have the opportunity, and you can even support it by scriptures, even your Mayavadi or worshipping demigods, you can always support it. But Krishna said it's not very intelligent.
Yeah, He gives that opportunity, but it's not very intelligent worshipping the demigods because the fruits are limited, right? They get the fruits, they get the decides, they go to the heavenly planets, enjoy for a long span of time, they just enjoy heavenly delights. So He grants them that opportunity, but they have to fall again. We know Chinya Punya Martya Lukam Vishanti, they have to fall to this material world again after they exhausted all their pious credits. So He grants everything, also impersonal realization. If that's what you want, He grants that. So you can merge into the Absolute, the Brahman. But we also hear after a long time, because the living entity is by nature filled with the desires, and so he starts to desire again activity, and then he falls down to the material world. So even though you can merge in the impersonal and the Brahma Jyoti, at one point you fall down. So it's not a permanent place in that sense. So yeah, thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.